Hello, everyone, and welcome to Movies You Should Have Watched. Today we are covering Gremlins. Hello, Monkey.
Hello, how are you?
I am doing okay. And hello, chat. I see Flair, Fritz, Freedom Fighter, Mashisu, and Corey has been in the chat so far. So, hi, guys. Hope you guys are doing well. So Gremlins, the second of our Christmas series, the first having been Die Hard over on Monkey's channel, a review you can still go watch if you have an opportunity after this one. Yeah, so this is an interesting movie. I remember when I was a kid, I had the board game for Gremlins. Like, I don't even remember how the rules worked or anything, just that you had to run around and try to get Gizmo into your backpack or something.
I loved Gremlins as a kid. I absolutely adored this movie and watched it all the time.
Yeah, as I watched it today, there was just so many iconic images to it. I mean, like a Gizmo in the backpack or with the Santa hat on, or Stripe with the gun and all that stuff. It just it's just such a timeless little movie because it doesn't really dwell on like the styles of the day, really. I mean, things look a little antiquated, I guess, in hairstyles and things, but generally speaking, it still looks like it's set in you couldn't tell it wasn't set in like the 90s or something, really.
The only thing that really gives it away is some of the tech. Like if you look at the televisions and stuff they're watching, this is old stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
Watching it again, what I really love about this movie, and I don't know how they pulled it off. They simultaneously don't take themselves seriously at all while taking themselves seriously.
Yeah, it's this weird, it's almost like the perfect balance of humor and scares and just absurdity. Because as I was watching it, it's some portions in it, like specifically where like the Gremlins suddenly show up and they're wearing like clothes that fit them.
Yes.
I thought, okay, I'm watching a live action cartoon. That's really what it is. It's a live action cartoon. And we'll get into it as we go. Actually, why don't we just start?
Sure.
So let me pull up the.
Well, while you're doing that, one thing I want to point out while we're doing this, Gremlins 2 treated itself almost entirely as a parody.
Yes, which I think was probably the smartest thing to do, all things considered.
I think they probably should have played it straight again.
You think so?
Yeah, because Gremlins 2 just didn't work for me at all.
There's elements of Gremlins 2 I like, but I don't know how they could have played it straight a second time and made it work like that. It almost seems like an admission, like there's no way we can outdo the first, so let's just play up the goofiness. That's how I looked at it.
In that case, just don't do it. Just don't.
So yeah, this movie was directed by Joe Dante. Joe Dante has done a few interesting movies like The Howling, the Twilight Zone movie, Explorers. If you haven't seen Explorers is sort of like Goonies in space, like Explorers. He even did the sequel. His track record since basically Gremlins 2 has kind of been downhill, let's say. He did done it. He did the Burbs. He did the Burbs and Amazon Women on the Moon, so that's in his favor. Let's see, and it was written by Chris Columbus. And if you don't know who Chris Columbus is, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm completely off the base, he directed the first 2 Harry Potter movies, amongst writing a zillion other films, including Mrs. Doubtfire and Home Alone and so on, and the Goonies as well. So he went from this straight to the Goonies. So Chris Columbus has written a big part of my childhood in a lot of ways.
Indeed, yeah.
And it was produced by Steven Spielberg, or at least Amblin Entertainment did. His production company did it. And there are a lot of little references to E.T. in this specifically, and also an Indiana Jones reference. But we'll get to that. Let's see. So and also just for the sake of this is made in 1984. Just to set the time frame of it.
Damn, I'm old.
Yeah. Oh, and do you know who the voice of Gizmo is?
I don't.
Howie Mandel.
You know what? That makes sense. That's almost his Bobby voice. So
it is. And it only makes sense sort of in retrospect when I think about it. It's like, oh yeah, I guess that is. So the movie opens in almost kind of a noir setting because you've got this dim lit alley in Chinatown, and you got a guy in a fedora giving a narration over the events, and it's got this sort of like old time crime mystery kind of thing going on. And we're introduced to this guy. His name is Rand Peltzer. And he talks about how he's an inventor and he's got a story to tell. And this is also kind of a trope that goes back to the kinds of movies that this is paying homage to, the old, 50s sci-fi horror films and such, which are featured at great length in this movie. Where you sort of, and it specifically reminds me of the 1956 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is also mentioned in the film, where there's a narration at the beginning, at the end, that sort of encapsulates what's going on. And there's a lot of elements to this that remind me of Invasion of the Body Snatchers just in general. But we'll get there. So our narrator is in Chinatown, and he's being led to some shop by some kid who looks kind of like Short Round from Indiana Jones 2. And he takes him down to this mysterious shop where his grandfather is overseeing things. Now, the guy who plays the grandfather, I don't remember his name, but he's been in a whole lot of different things as a character actor. And he's got this one milky eye, and he's got this long pipe. And the Rand Peltzer tries to sell him his invention. And we see a
bathroom buddy.
The bathroom buddy. And, the more that I saw the bathroom buddy, I thought that is the precursor to the iPhone.
Yeah, yeah.
Everything is an app in that thing. And a lot of the inventions that this guy makes, I mean, we were told right off the bat that he's an inventor, and we just kind of see his inventions over the course of the film that are more and more ridiculous. And of course, they never work.
And don't work, yes.
And don't work, yeah. Except for lowering the lights by remote control. That's the one thing he had. They had a remote control for dimming the lights in his house, and that worked without a problem. Everything else fucked up. So he's looking around this mysterious little shop. He starts hearing this little squeaky noise in the background, and he goes to look at it, and he takes the blanket off this little cage or box or whatever, and he sees what we will come to find is the Mogwai. That'll later be called Gizmo. Let's see.
One of the cutest things ever put in a movie. Let's be real.
Yeah, the design of the creatures is really what sells it, and also the articulation of the faces in a lot of the close-ups. I mean, for the time, it's amazing looking, and the fact that it's not CGI, the fact that it's a practical effect every single time. As far as I know, there's only two instances of anything other than like in-camera effects going on. There's one instance of stop motion that I recall, and there's one instance of animation, but we'll get there. But yeah, the facial features of Gizmo and the other Mogwai before they turn into the Gremlins is just really impressive even today. I was trying to look for something that would sort of throw me off and make me think, oh yeah, it looks fake. No, it's all very, very legitimate looking. So he tries to sell his invention to the guy, but he won't take it. He tries to buy the Mogwai, but Grandpa says no. Mogwai comes with a lot of responsibility, so no, he's not for sale. But then the grandson, who knows that they need the money, sneaks out in the back alley, meets the guy, and sells it to him for $200.
Yeah, tells him, meet me outside, meet me out back. Yeah,
meet me out back. I'll sell it to you for anyway. And then he gives him the rules. And there are 3 major rules that the kid lays down in taking care of the Mogwai. The first one is they hate bright lights. I don't recall if the kid tells him in that narration that bright light will kill him. But later, the guy says that he says specifically to Billy, sunlight will kill him. And I'm like, I don't remember them saying that, just that they hate bright lights, but I don't remember exactly.
Neither do I, now that you say it. Yeah, but when he tells Billy, we get the actual rules.
Yeah, we get the actual rules. So first, no bright lights. Secondly, do not get them wet, which it seems like a creature that lives on this planet would have a hard time not doing that. But
well, they even specifically said don't feed him or don't let him drink.
Yeah, don't let him drink. It's like you don't feed them water, so it's really weird. And lastly, the most important one, the one you never forget: don't feed them after midnight.
Which is always the one I hated the most.
Yeah, which is kind of a weird rule. It's like, well, anytime after midnight is after midnight until midnight again.
Yeah, they don't give you like midnight till 7 a.m. just after midnight.
The other thing too that always bugged me is that the original ad for Gremlins 2, the narrator starts talking about, there were 3 rules and never ever get them wet. They switched it around somehow in the trailer for the second one where they made the wet part the one you never forget. Whereas in this one, we all know it's don't feed them after midnight. That's the worst part.
Well, it makes sense if you think about Gizmo.
Yes.
Because Gizmo, when we get to the part where they become gremlins, he could have taken part.
It's true. He could have.
But he knew that he shouldn't. And when he sold when the kid sold Gizmo, there was only one. They had no idea that there would be any water. So the feeding them after midnight would be the most important thing, where we know after watching the first one that the water's where the trouble really comes in, because Gizmo's bastard children are bastards. They're just bastards. So yeah.
It's like Gizmo is the only moral mogwai on the planet. Anything that comes out of Gizmo is a little demon just waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Which is weird because, I thought if it was like they eat after midnight and then they turn evil, okay, but we already saw that they were already assholes before they ate after midnight. So
yeah.
Freaking stuff. So just turning into monsters, I guess, is the other thing. But anyway, so then we cut to the montage of the town we're in, the town that will become essentially a character in this movie, Kingston Falls. And we get little set pieces of like the Christmas tree place. We see that it's been snowing. We see that it's Christmas time. We see a big billboard for Rockin' Ricky Rialto on the radio, and he's in an Indiana Jones costume in a cartoon, which harkens back to Spielberg and everything. And we get Christmas music. We get the I forget, was it the Divines or something? I forget what it was, but it's like a classic wall of sound sort of Christmas song. And we see Corey Feldman is in this movie.
Yeah, I had forgotten that until I watched it today.
Yeah, and as I was watching, I thought, God, Corey, he was in Gremlins, he was in Goonies, he was in Friday the 13th, part 2 or 3 or whatever. He was all over the place. It was amazing.
He really was.
Let's see, and we get this sort of like very Americana montage of this little town, sort of to set the stage, and then we get a shot of our hero of the story, to an extent, and I'll get to that later. Billy Peltzer, played by Zach Galligan, who, so far as I know, has done nothing else but Gremlins movies for his entire career. I mean, I know he's done other things. I mean, trust me, I know that. But of everybody in this film, I think
nothing anybody cares about.
Yeah, he's the only one who hasn't had a career of any note after this, whereas just about every other character I've seen in zillions of other things, practically. But he's trying to get his VW Bug to start, and it won't because it's all frozen over and everything. And as he's trying to do this, Mr. Futterman shows up.
Mr. Futterman, our first setup character.
And he's played by, I don't remember his name, the actor's name, but he's been in a zillion things. He's a very well-established character actor. He was in Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight. I mean, that's the first thing I think of because he was a significant character in that one. But Mr. Futterman, as we come to learn, is a World War II veteran, which is more viable a notion at this time in history in the 80s. He also is a xenophobe, and he hates foreigners and foreign things. And
he also tells us about Gremlins.
Yes, later on, as he's drunk and stumbling out of a bar, he talks about Gremlins back in WWII, and how they all come. The foreigners, they put him in the machines and stuff.
I thought he did it right here too. I thought he just did a little bit of that, and Billy gets away from him because Billy's late for work, and he uses that as an excuse to get away from Mr. Xenophobe. But I swear he brought up Gremlins right here.
Okay, I don't remember. I know he did after he got out of the bar
could be
the first
wrong.
time. Maybe I'm misremembering. But he also lets us know a kind of an odd fact about how Billy is also a artist, a cartoonist. He's trying to become like a comic book artist or something. And the couple of times that we do see him do art in this thing, at least as far as portrayed in the film, it's really good. But then Mr. Futterman answers like, "Hey, maybe you'll get your cartoons in there up there with Little Abner."
Yes.
They don't print those anymore, Mr. Futterman. Oh, they don't? Oh. It's just like he's a man out of time, basically, but very set in his ways. And then we get we get some more montage of the town. We start moving into the orchestral soundtrack of the film, which is also a really good thing because I like movies that stay away from like rock songs or synthesizer stuff. You know, they actually have an orchestra playing. I forget who did the music for this. It was someone, Jerry Goldsmith. Yeah, Jerry Goldsmith. So it's no slouch there when it comes to movie soundtracks. And as we watch Billy try to start going to work, they pass by the theater, and on the theater marquee there are titles for movies, and one of them is "Watch the Skies," which is a reference back to the original The Thing movie with the Howard Hawks film, where at the very end, that's the warning they give out regarding the aliens that might be coming. Watch the skies, which obviously there's lots and lots of little homages to old sci-fi movies in this. And then we get to Billy's work where he works at a bank, and there's his girlfriend, or I guess wannabe girlfriend, Phoebe Cates.
She's so damn cute.
She is one of the most beautiful women on the planet to this day. I swear to God. Kevin Kline is a lucky, lucky man. Yeah.
I said, isn't he though?
Oh yeah. I mean, beyond just being a talented guy, he's married to Phoebe Cates. And we also see that Judge Reinhold is in this. So it's almost like a Fast Times at Ridgemont High sort of reunion for these two.
It really is. And again, that's another one I forgot about. He's got a really forgettable character, actually.
Yeah, I was actually, now, if I'm not mistaken, after the first few minutes of the movie, we never see him again. I would have thought the Gremlins would have gone after him, or we have a scene of that, but we never do.
I wonder if that's something that was cut.
I have to think it is, yeah.
It was all set up for it. Every character we meet at the beginning of this movie interacts with the Gremlins except him.
Yeah, it was really, really odd. So yeah, somewhere there's probably a cut scene of him getting attacked or something. Although in relation to every other character, I didn't see him so much as a villain. He just seemed like kind of a jerk. You know,
not everybody that gets fucked by the Gremlins is a villain.
Well, no, I understand that too, but the way they played him off, it was kind of like you think that something's going to happen to him, but then anyway, so Billy's brought his dog to work, and he's hiding him under the table as he's at his teller thing, and then we have our sub-villain or something, our antagonist that we think is going to be somewhere more important, but Mrs. Deagle shows up, and Mrs. Deagle is this very stern, not very nice lady, and she's walking up to the bank holding a giant snowman head. Yes. And she runs into a mother and her two small children. And basically, Mrs. Deagle is a combination of Mr. Scrooge or just Scrooge from, Christmas Carol,
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Potter from It's a Wonderful Life, who was the banker evil force of Bedford Falls, which is the name of the town in It's a Wonderful Life. And she runs into this mother and their children, and the lady starts begging her for some more time on their mortgage or something because her husband's out of work. And Mrs. Deagle's like, well, now, you know what to ask Santa for Christmas this year.
It's a bitch line, too.
Yeah, I know. It's a great line. And so she marches in there while this lady's, off in a huff because, this... it's back in the days where like the bank owned your house and you could actually go talk to the banker kind of thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Kind of an antiquated notion now. But she marched. Sorry.
That's one of the things that the small town, you mentioned that it's basically a character in here. That this is part of it is the way that this was set up.
Let's see. So she marches in and puts the snowman head down in front of Billy and says, "This was my imported Bavarian snowman." And the dog smashed it. And so then she turns into the Wicked Witch of the West going like, "I'll get you and your little dog too." So anyway, she's just here to set herself up as like the villain, and she torments Billy off and on for this thing. We meet Judge Reinhold's character, whose name I don't even remember. It just kind of came and went.
Yeah, he basically only serves to tell us that Billy's basically supporting his family.
Yep.
And they set him up almost as a competitor in the race for Phoebe Cates' love, and then they just never talk about him again.
And then he never shows up again. Yeah, it's one of the sort of narrative flaws of this movie that always sticks out to me whenever I see it. And then we meet. We go from there to where Billy and him are at a bar where Billy's doodling, and again they try to compete for Phoebe Cates' attention. But we also find out that sets up the fact that Phoebe Cates also moonlights at this bar as a bartender or waitress, which comes into play later. It's a little fact you can easily miss given how quickly everything moves. Because I remember when I was a kid, when she ends up at the bar later, I never understood why is she at the bar?
Oh yeah,
in brief. But we also then meet the absolute badass of this movie, Billy's mom.
Yes.
Yeah, we get to the kitchen and Billy's there and he's helping his mom make breakfast. We see the egg cracker invention. The inventions that this guy makes are basically the cure for the most lazy people on the planet. Anything that has to do with using your hands tries to cure a machine. It's like, let's break some eggs. Well, instead of just tapping it on the side of a bowl and breaking it open, I'm going to have an automated chicken head bang down and hit them like a hammer to crack them open for you. Instead of juicing my own oranges with my hands in a juicer, I'm going to have this insane juice machine. It's all very weird stuff. Or dealing cards, or it's just it's fun.
Thinking back, I wonder how much of this seemed like there's nothing else to invent anymore at the time.
Yeah.
Because that's been a thought throughout history. I mean, there's people today. There's nothing else to invent. There is.
Yes.
But I mean, at the time, do you remember Pee-wee's Big Adventure?
Yes.
I mean,
the opening to that with the Rube Goldberg and all that fun stuff going on.
Yeah, it's pretty much all of Billy's dad's inventions right there.
So mom is chopping up food or something, and she's watching It's a Wonderful Life on a little mini TV, and Billy and she looks very perturbed or something, and Billy asks her what's wrong, and she's kind of shrugging and says, bad movie. It's subjecting yourself to Wonderful Life. And then Dad shows up with the gift of Gizmo, dims the lights. We also get a little bit of a look at the house, and we see a little bit of the geography. We see that there's a crossed pair of swords on the wall, which will come in handy later, and where the fireplace is and all kinds of stuff. There's little hints of things to come later that are just sort of mentioned visually but not dwelled on. And then Gizmo makes his full appearance because we haven't actually seen him face on at this point. And he's the tiniest, cutest little thing.
He's adorable.
Yeah. Again, kudos to the character designer for both the Gremlins and Gizmo. You made both the most terrifying and the most cute monsters ever, pretty much.
Yeah. I never thought that movie was that scary.
We'll get to that because watching it again today. I noticed a lot of things that I hadn't really thought of for many years. So, let's see. We get some more establishing Billy bonding with Gizmo, where he's Gizmo's singing and Billy's trying to copy his tunes on the keyboard, and then Gizmo corrects him when he gets a note wrong. And I'm thinking okay, you guys gotta understand this isn't a pet, right? This is some intelligent fucking creature. It always kind of weird me shouldn't you be more impressed with this little thing than you are? It's he's just like a gerbil or a dog or something. Yeah.
That's kind of what he looks like.
Yeah. He also looked like a popple. Remember popples?
Oh yeah, he does.
I kind of thought, does he look like a popple? And of course they kind of end up becoming popples after he gets wet. Let's see. So Gizmo gets a Santa hat on, which is also iconic. Then he gets a little bandage on his head. I just remember all these little variants of Gizmo with different things on his head. We see the orange juicer invention. I just got my notes down here. And then Corey Feldman shows up to sort of hang out. And
doesn't that seem weird to you? He's way too young to just be hanging out with Billy.
Yeah, Billy, I get the notion that Billy's like late teens, something. I mean, somewhere like 18, 19, maybe somewhere in there at least. Mm-hmm. And Corey Feldman's got to be like, what, like 12, 11?
Yeah, if that, yeah.
Yeah, and so, yeah, I don't know. He just kind of shows up and hangs out. And he's looking at Gizmo and everything. And then he reaches out to pick up Gizmo or whatever. And he knocks over a paintbrush can that has water in it. And water gets all over Gizmo. Mm-hmm. And this happens, and another thing I noticed is that this all happens very quickly. I didn't realize the movie was as short as it was until I looked today. I was like, oh, it's only an hour and 45 minutes, basically. And so the water...
Wait. Sorry. I had the opposite thought. I thought, wow, this movie's a lot longer than I thought it was.
Really?
Gremlins faster than I realized.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I thought this movie was like hour and a half tops, and I'm like, oh wow, hour and 46. I'm like, okay.
But Gizmo gets wet, and then we see the miracle of birth, more or less, where these little tiny fuzzy balls pop out of his back as they bubble up and pop out, and five little balls show up, and then they very quickly start expanding and growing, and then unfolding into new Mogwai. The only other Mogwai in this entire movie that I know of that has a name is the villain Mogwai / Gremlin, Stripe, who for the longest time when I was a kid thought his name was Spike for some reason.
I've made that mistake many times myself, even today.
Yeah. He's got a mohawk, a little stripe on his head. Corey Feldman is basically who names him in the movie. He says, oh, look, that one's got a stripe on his head. Yeah, so Stripe and the rest of these little Mogwai, they're suddenly there. And Billy's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So they kind of sleep overnight. And then there's this really great little scene where all the new Mogwai, the bully Mogwai basically, are playing this tiny Donkey Kong arcade game.
Yes.
And all the lights are going on and everything. And Gizmo is just like being all polite and everything and just sitting aside, like not wanting to have anything to do with it. And then Billy can't find his dog all of a sudden, Barney. And we see Barney has been tied up and strung up, thankfully not lynched or anything, but strung up against the deck in Christmas lights. And it's like
hanging from him, yeah.
Hanging from Christmas lights. It's like, how... And none of this is suspicious. Like, who did this kind of thing? And he thinks that maybe Miss Deagle did it or something.
Yes.
Doesn't make any sense.
He actually blames her directly, and his mom tells him, nope, you can't say that because you don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mom is the real hero of this movie, I tell you what.
She really is. She's the only smart one in the movie.
And then Dad is getting ready to go off to an inventors convention. And he has he shows off one of the dumbest inventions, a motorized hammer. I mean,
yes.
Like, again, taking anything that has to do with just simple tasks using your hands and trying to automate them. You hold the hammer handle and then the head just kind of pneumatically pumps back and forth. And like, it's just...
Yeah, and that thing had to weigh like 40 pounds. That thing was huge.
Exactly. The motor on it and everything. It's just, it's so impractical.
Got like 4 or 5 different pistons. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. All right. So then he's off to his inventors convention. Then we get to the part where Billy and Kate, Phoebe Cates' character, help Mr. Futterman out of the bar because he's been drinking too much. And they get him to go home or whatever. He's talking about Gremlins and WW2. Mr. Futterman owns a snowplow. He's like the snowplow guy of this or something, and makes a big deal about the snowplow, which comes into play later. And he keeps going off about Gremlins and foreigners and foreign parts and all this stuff. And then
it's the first alt-right.
He really was, wasn't he? Yeah, he's sort of like the xenophobic nationalist right-wing guy.
Yeah.
And then so Billy walks Kate home, and Kate says something really depressing. And we find out later why, but he's like, they're talking about Christmas, and she's like, oh, I hate Christmas. And she says, well, everyone's opening their presents, most people are opening their wrists.
Yes.
That was so dark. It's like, what the fuck?
Well, Billy asks her about it, and she tells us that, that's the time of year people kill themselves the most. Yeah,
and we'll get to that later. God.
If this movie had been made in the 90s, she would have had dark black eyeliner on.
Yeah, and the other thing too that always amazed me, it seems like all of these people are like part of this town. Like this is the only town they've ever known, kind of thing. So it never made sense to me how Billy did not know the story about Kate's dad.
Yeah,
that always blew my mind because that is such a weird thing to have happened in that town. I can't believe that like he had absolutely no idea, but I don't know. I mean, it's a weird moment. We'll get there.
It could be that it happened elsewhere and she moved there and it was just something that was never talked about.
I guess.
I mean, there's explanations for it, but yeah, if everybody was always there, it makes no sense.
So Billy leaves her at the doorstep, all very, very safe, non-sexual. There's not even a kiss or anything. There's just sort of like puppy dog love kind of thing. Very innocent, very 50s-ish, like a lot of this movie's trying to go for. But then Billy takes one of the spare Mogwai off to the high school to the science teacher there, Mr. Hansen.
I love that that's where you take something scientific, the high school science teacher.
Yeah, again, the small town kind of thing. Like, where do you go? It's like,
right.
I'm going to take you. Yeah, so he takes this this gremlin off there, or this Mogwai at that point. The science teacher, the first thing he does is stick a needle in him and take a blood sample, which sets up something later. And then we get
a high school science teacher. What the fuck is he taking blood for?
Yeah, he's gonna let me run some tests. Like, run some where? Do you have like a secret lab somewhere? It's just okay. Yeah, I suppose you have blood testing equipment in your high school.
There's some things about this movie that you can't. It's one of those movies where you just suspend disbelief and enjoy it.
You hate you because there's so many moments in this movie that just don't make any lick of sense to reality, even the reality that you would impose upon a movie like this in the first place. And then we get I think we're back in Billy's room, and he's watching Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1956. Great flick, great flick. One of my favorite stories and movies and everything else. And this is where the Mogwai, Stripe, and the other bad ones are sitting in there in a box, and they're kind of complaining. They're hungry. They're hungry. And Billy looks over at the clock, and the clock says like 11:40 or something. And he's like, "Well, it's early enough. It's not quite midnight yet. It's okay." So he goes downstairs, gets a big plate of fried chicken out of the fridge. I always, for some reason, I always thought it was Kentucky Fried Chicken because there's a lot of product placement in this movie.
Oh yeah, there is. Yeah, there is.
Yeah, we see Burger King, and we see the YMCA, and we see Sony in a couple places and things. Also, speaking of product placement, I just want to bring up something real quick. It is really odd to me. This was a Warner Brothers film, and there are things from a dozen different studios in this movie that I guess they must have paid some kind of licensing for. Like, there's Disney in this, and there's E.T., there's Indiana Jones, and there's all these other like all the movies that they're referencing, both visually and otherwise. I don't think you would see that today. I don't know what was going on with licensing back in the 80s, but to see studios have their material cross over like that is just nuts.
Well, was this before or after E.T.? E.T. was 82, right?
This is after E.T. because the E.T. the toy we see a couple of times.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
And even at one point, one of the Gremlins says, "Phone home," and so that kind of thing. So
it could also be that there were. I mean, this is a Spielberg movie. He wasn't the director in this one, but his name was all over it.
Yeah,
maybe you throw your license to him for.
The only other time that I know of where you could see Disney, or I should say Mickey Mouse, because at one point one of the Gremlins is wearing a Mickey Mouse hat.
Yes.
The only other movie I know of where you'd see Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny show up in the same movie is Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yep.
And that was the first time those characters ever met. But anyway, so they have the fried chicken. And then Billy wakes up the next morning. Sorry.
Gizmo flat refuses to eat.
Yes. Yeah. Gizmo knows that it's the wrong thing to do. He knows what the dangers are, but he doesn't do anything to stop it at the same time. He doesn't like try to warn him away or say, don't do it. But anyway, so they eat the chicken. They just gobble it up. Billy wakes up the next morning, and all the other gremlins, all the other mogwai have turned into cocoons. These alien, almost like from Aliens cocoons, but also reminiscent of the pods from Invasion of the Body Snatchers that we saw referenced earlier. And also around that same time, on that same night, back at the high school, for some reason, the high school teacher is there at 2 a.m. I looked at the clock. It's like almost 2 a.m. or something when he's still at the high school for some reason. And he leaves out a piece of bread or something that the Mogwai gets his hands on and starts eating. So all the extra gremlins are cocooned by the next morning. Let's see, what have I got? Oh yeah, so the cocoons are sitting there and they're going through a pupal stage or whatever. And then we cut to, and this is another part of the movie that I never really understood. We keep cutting back to Dad at this inventors convention. Him being away seems to be significant for some reason because he's the one supposedly narrating the story, but he's not around for 90% of it.
Yeah. He doesn't see any of it happen.
Yeah, but he's at this inventors convention, and in the background we see the time machine from the old Time Machine movie sitting there. Robbie the Robot from Forbidden Planet makes an appearance at one point. If it wasn't already hit you over the head that this is trying to be an homage to 50s sci-fi horror films, this pretty much does it. I mean, I like it. I mean, it's neat for the nerd and everything, but it's just a little gratuitous at times. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. And then the eggs hatch. And all hell breaks loose. And this is where we get into the horror part of the movie, or at least the implication of horror. The first real scene of that is back at the high school science lab, where the egg has hatched, and the science teacher can't find him. And it's all very dark. All the lights are out. It's very shadowy. And you just hear a little pattering of feet, and you see things moving around. He's trying to find the guy or the monster.
Feeded a candy bar.
Yeah, he tried to feed it a candy bar, and so he hears it underneath a table or something, and he reaches underneath with the candy bar. It's like, here you go, and then he starts screaming, ah! And then we cut away from that. And then Billy shows up because he's trying to get a hold. He sees that the eggs have hatched. He tries to call the science teacher. He can't get a hold of the guy, so he runs over there.
Well, no, the science teacher told him to come over.
No, did he? Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. He called him. Yeah, that's right. And Billy shows up, and the science teacher's body is on the floor. The syringe is in his ass.
Yes.
And he's just laying there. And Billy doesn't do anything. He doesn't go to check on him. I mean, we presume he's dead. We don't know how or what happened. There's no blood or anything. And this is one of the things that makes this movie so approachable, even though it's kind of scary, is that all the violence is property damage.
Yeah.
The stuff that you see. The only time that you ever see someone hurt, really, is Mrs. Deagle, which we'll get to later, and kind of the Santa Claus, the guy in the Santa Claus suit.
Yeah, kind of.
Everybody else who dies or is injured or something in this is off camera, or it's cut away. You don't actually see it happen, which is great because, you can keep the movie PG, basically, to a certain extent. Well, except for the gremlin gets shot in the face.
Well, that's a gremlin.
Yeah, the gremlin gets shot in the face. It doesn't matter. And the very end, of course, with what happens to Stripe. But anyway, so the teacher's dead. Billy doesn't even check on him. And then he kind of runs out he gets all scared. It's like, oh no, I got to get home because, there's all these monsters there now. And then we get the best scene in the movie. The best scene in the movie. Mom in the kitchen. Mom starts hearing noises upstairs that don't sound good. And her first instinct is to grab a knife. And she starts going up the stairs. And then she hears a noise back downstairs, and she goes down there. and there's a gremlin sitting in her blender juicer thing, and it starts throwing plates at her or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then she turns the blender on.
Yes.
And I remember
Awesome
as a kid, it was just the most, I mean, it was shocking and gross and funny all at the same time, because I'd never seen something like that before as a kid. I'd never seen like a character in a movie sliced and diced right in front of you.
For me, it was this whole scene. It was just funny when I was a kid, and that's how I remembered it. I also saw this. I mean, I was 9 or 10 at the time that I saw it. So, this movie never scared me, and I let my daughter watch it when she was about the same age, and she got freaked by it. She had trouble sleeping for weeks, and so I went back and watched it again. I'm like, oh, whoops! I guess that was a little bit freaky. Maybe not scary, but definitely freaky.
Well, the gremlins themselves are, I mean, if you look at their design and everything, they are demonic looking. I mean, they are really scary looking, especially if you're a little kid. It's just like, that's a scary thing. But at the same time, they end up doing a lot of really funny things, so it kind of offsets that. But in this scene, but in the opening scenes of this in particular, they're like little demon monsters. And so Mom slices one up in a blender. She stabs one to death.
And the best one.
The best one.
Microwave.
She's a gremlin is threatening or menacing her from sitting in front of an open microwave. She sprays it in the face with like Pam or something, and it backs up, and she pushes in the microwave and turns it up high, and then it starts flickering, and then just explodes inside the microwave. And I just thought, I remember one time, I don't know if it was the first time I saw it, but I was watching with a friend of mine when I was a little kid, and at the same time we all went gross. It was just like so good. Let's see. So the blender and the knife and the microwave, but Stripe gets away. And also let's see. Billy comes home just in time where his mother's being strangled to death by one of the gremlins who had jumped out of the Christmas tree. And he grabs one of the swords off the wall and then basically golf swings the gremlin into the fireplace where it just burns to death. And, weirdly enough, I noticed this later, for the next little while, Billy's running around town with Gizmo in a backpack and carrying that sword. He's like a little knight running around against these things. It was kind of weird. I hadn't noticed that before.
But the sword's obviously not very sharp because it didn't slice the gremlin in two.
Well, he hit it with the flat side. Like he really just wanted to golf swing it. Like he should have just sliced it in half. But, I guess maybe that's too violent or something for this movie. I don't know. But Stripe gets away and he runs to the YMCA. And meanwhile, Billy finally gets into his head, gee, maybe I should tell the police. So he goes down to the police station, and like in a lot of old 50s movies, especially like the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the police don't believe him. They start saying, oh, yeah, sure. Did you see little green men or something or whatever? And these are the most ineffective police officers in the world, of course.
And the deputy, I don't know his name. All I remember him from is he was the bad guy in Beverly Hills Cop.
Well, he's also, if you'll remember, from Breaking Bad.
Oh yeah, he was in Breaking Bad.
Yeah, he's the guy, Ermin Trout, whatever his first name is.
He did a lot of shit in the 80s like that, where he had minor parts. Because even in Beverly Hills Cop, he wasn't the main bad guy. He was just the one who killed Eddie's friend.
Yeah. Again, there's a whole lot of character actors in this that would go on to have much richer careers than Zach Galligan ever did.
Yes.
So the cops don't believe him. But I forget exactly how Billy figures out to go to the YMCA, because he does get there eventually, just in time to see Stripe jump into the pool.
Yes.
Was it? Maybe he saw that happen and then he goes to the cops. Maybe that's what happened. I think maybe I'm getting my things out of order.
I think you have them backwards there.
That's right. Yeah, he followed Stripe to the YMCA. Stripe jumps into the swimming pool, and then one of the cheapest but most effective effects. You got you got dry ice, green lights, and little weird sounds going on, and you have this like, something horrible's happening, and then he runs to the cops to tell him.
So cool.
It was, and again, it's a really effective way. I mean, there's so much just practical effects and leave it up to your imagination stuff in this movie. I really wish movies today would just take a lesson from these things. You don't have to have CGI all over the place. You can do things in camera or simple effects just with atmosphere and music and sound effects that you don't let the audience's imagination fill in their own gaps for you rather than having to explain everything all the time.
Right. Yeah. I would agree with that.
So the cops are ineffective, and then we get the one of the other few non-in-camera effects for the Gremlins, stop motion of just this. First, you see Stripe walking down the street out of the shadows, all by himself, and then immediately thereafter there is an army, just an absolute gaggle of Gremlins behind him.
Mm-hmm.
And then we enter into Mayhem City for the next rest of the movie, basically.
Pretty much, yeah.
And now it's just a bunch of it's just a bunch of set pieces. It's just a bunch of set piece events of destruction and people getting attacked and that kind of stuff. And
it really gets silly.
Yes, it gets. This is where it turns into a live action cartoon in so many ways. I'm not going to go deeply into each one of these little events because you really just need to see it for yourself. But we first end up at the Futterman's house, where the television is not behaving the way he wants it to. And these are the other pair of deaths in the movie. Mr. and Mrs. Futterman get run over by his own plow. We don't see it happen.
It makes no sense, because the Gremlins steal his plow. He's outside of his garage and he hears it, and it breaks through the garage, and he just kind of stands there, and then he slowly runs into his house.
Yeah. Maybe deer in the headlights kind of thing a little bit.
But I guess, yeah, I understand why they did it for the movie. It had to make it work, but logically, yeah, that makes no sense.
And from there we go to, now this is something that always confused me as a kid. Now, watching the movie today, of course, we cut to a big sign that says Deagle Residence, right? Mm-hmm. When I was a kid, and I was still not quite that sharp, Mrs. Deagle in this scene does not have her red wig on. And I didn't know it was a wig earlier in the movie. So for the longest time as a kid, when I watched this movie, I didn't understand who this lady was. I couldn't make the connection because she has gray hair and she's in a completely different outfit. And she's taking care of cats. So my image of this woman who hates animals, who has red hair, who wears these, foofy, very antiquated clothing and everything, the lady that we see here is the complete opposite of that. And I didn't recognize the face, so I didn't make the connection for the longest time as a kid.
I was the same way.
Yeah. So anyway, so Mrs. Deagle is at home. She's in this big house all by herself with a bunch of cats. She's an old cat lady. And then
it's a chairlift down.
Yeah, she rides a chairlift down the stairs, which is odd to me because when you see her walking around with her snowman head, she seemed awfully spry.
Didn't she?
Yeah. So as I, one of the things I thought when I was a kid, I thought, is that one of the dad's inventions?
Nice.
Because I had never seen that before. That was the first time I can recall that I ever saw a chairlift ever. So I didn't understand what it was. It seemed like something weird to me. It seemed like something alien. But anyway, so she starts hearing singing coming from outside her door. And so she gets a bucket of water or something to go throw on the carolers.
Yeah, she starts cursing at she doesn't swear, but those darn carolers.
And she opens the door, and we have our first real, this is a human cartoon kind of thing, where you have a row of gremlins all wearing earmuffs and caps and little scarves, and they have little Christmas carol sheets in front of them, and they're all singing, going back and forth. And she starts screaming, and this is when this has gone completely off the rails as far as taking it seriously anymore. It's an absolute cartoon show. So she screams and runs back in the house, and she tries to escape by getting on her chairlift, but we've cut to some gremlins have been messing with the wires outside. and the chairlift goes at 1,000,000 miles an hour up the staircase
and flies off.
And she crashes through as the cops are driving down the road. Okay, the cops are starting to see this craziness go on, and they see her smash through the window and fly through the air and slam onto the ground into the middle of the street.
Which is really kind of dark.
It is. I mean, that was one of the things that always kind of. This movie has such a weird balance of tone and like, is it a comedy? Is it a horror movie? Is it a suspense movie? I mean, it's all over the place. But again, somehow it just does it with just enough of each element that it all kind of works. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but at the same time, it plays it straight, you know?
Yes.
Which is kind of, I mean, that was the perfect way to do this. You couldn't have the actors trying to ham it up. You had to have them play it straight because that's what the Gremlins were there for. They were there to make the fantastical element of it. So yeah, the chair of death, the cops see Santa, a guy in a Santa suit being like, he's just got gremlins crawling all over him. And what do the cops do? They run away. They don't do anything. They don't try to help the lady in the street. They don't try to stop the guy from being killed by the gremlins. They just turn around and scream and run away.
Not that it helps them.
Not that it helps them, because almost immediately thereafter they get into a car crash and presumably also die, I guess. And it's also one of the few instances in the movie where you see the special effect, because underneath the police car that crashes, there's this ramp plate right at the front.
Oh, yeah.
And that's part of the mechanism that allows the car to have flipped over. It's one of the few times in the movie where you kind of see, it's sort of like seeing the strings on the flying saucers. That's one of the few times you see that. And we get a really quick, we hear the radio announcer guy, Rockin' Ricky Rialto. Somebody called in and saying that there were like little green men running around or whatever. I think it was Corey Feldman, or was it Zach Mulligan or something? Yeah, Corey Feldman's calling. He said, "Guy, there's little gremlins running around." And the guy says, cut it out with this Orson Welles crap. This is Christmas, not Halloween. Another callback to old sci-fi with War of the Worlds. And then we get probably the best scene in the movie next to Mom going badass, and that's the bar scene.
No, I don't like that scene.
You don't like the bar scene? Okay, well, the bar scene is all over the place. So Kate is at the bar, and she's trying to play bartender to a room full of gremlins. And we get a montage of the gremlins all doing something weird. You've got a gremlin who's being a flasher, which is pretty funny. You got gremlins getting drunk. You got there's this one part where it's like, I don't know, jazzy blue noir gremlin sitting in the corner by himself, like under a spotlight. And then all of a sudden this other gremlin pops up with like hand puppets and starts like making little noises at him. It's just it's so weird. And then we got
cross-dressing.
You have the poker game where Stripe is there, and next to him is a cross-dressed. And again, we're assuming that all the gremlins are inherently male, just the way that they all operate. But anyway, this one in particular is wearing a little wig and lipstick, and is playing girl gremlin. And then as a gremlin next to Stripe wins the poker hand, Stripe pulls out a pistol and shoots him in the face.
Shoots him, yes.
Which is just like, and nobody cares. Like, yeah, whatever, gremlins.
Stripe shot first.
I thought it was one of the most imaginative scenes in the entire movie, especially on a technical level, with how much stuff was going on and how each one of these custom gremlins was only going to be on screen for maybe like 6 seconds, but they had to make each one of them to do those things. So that's why I think it's one of the most impressive scenes.
I think it's an impressive scene. I just think this of all of the scenes is the one that they went a little too far with being cute with themselves.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Lee Fritz, thank you so much. They don't die, actually. They visit Billy in the second one, if the second is canon, of course. The cops? Oh, the cops don't die. Oh, the Futtermans. Oh, that's right.
The Futtermans, that's right.
You're right. They did survive, which is weird. That is really weird. I forgot about that. But why? How would they have survived a snowplow driving straight at them? Because the suggestion is they got completely sliced. So...
Yeah, for the record, I've only seen the second one maybe twice.
Okay.
and I hated it both times. So there's going to be parts I'm going to forget about that.
Yeah, the second one I've seen a couple of times. You kind of have to take it on as its own thing, really, to enjoy it, because it's mostly just like side gags and visual things and stuff. It's definitely not as good as the first one, but it was entertaining in its way, kind of.
Yeah,
anyway,
yes,
we can talk about that another time if we really want to, but I don't care. We also have Flashdance Gremlin.
Yes.
There was Flashdance Gremlin. It's just like
which, for anybody watching today who never saw that movie, you would have no idea what the fuck that's in reference to.
Yeah. Yeah, the only things about this movie that really set it in its time are a couple of, like, this is one of those references where it's like you had to be there. Because Flashdance is not as well known as, say, Invasion of the Body Snatchers or something, or War of the Worlds. But yeah, so there are all these little custom gremlins. And finally, Kate is able to escape when Billy shows up, and he kind of gets her out of there. And they hide for a little bit, but this is where Kate tells the story. We take time out from everything else going on. Okay, the town is being ripped apart by gremlins. People are being either run over, or they crash, or they're being killed by the gremlins, who knows what. And we take time out for Phoebe Cates to tell us the story of why she hates Christmas.
There's a reason they did it here. And it's because all this bad shit's going on, and she makes the comment, it's another reason to hate Christmas.
Right, yes. That's the intro.
At least it wasn't like just completely out of the blue.
Yeah, but I mean, in context of everything else going on, it's still kind of weird to just sort of stop and reminisce for a moment on the bad things. At the same time, if you go back to some of the 50s movies, that's also kind of how they were structured too. They would take moments to try to like insert drama and emotion between the characters when it probably didn't make sense to, but just because that was the time to do it. So she tells this story about...
I like that you just laughed at this story.
I know, it's so ridiculous. It's like, I can't do it justice by trying to reiterate it here, but the short version is she hates Christmas because her father went missing and they found him dead, stuck in the chimney in a Santa Claus outfit. He had broken his neck and died instantly trying to come down the chimney and surprise them for Christmas.
Yes. I think you did that justice. There's not much else you can do with the story.
No, not much. The way she tells it, though, it's just so melodramatic and everything else. But the thing I remember most, actually I remember more than that, is how they made fun of that in Gremlins 2.
Yes.
When they stop in the middle of everything and Phoebe Cates kind of goes all distant, she starts talking about, I forget what it was. There's someone else in her family who died on Abraham Lincoln's birthday or something. Yes. And she gets interrupted before she can finish it because everybody's just like, no. So you know that movie is completely taking itself not seriously and poking fun at its predecessor. If you had no illusions are left after that they were not taking themselves seriously and just making fun of themselves, which is why I can kind of appreciate Gremlins 2, because at least I know that they weren't trying to make us take it seriously. So,
well, the first one was done so well with them doing both taking it seriously and not at the same time. I don't know any other way to say it with how this movie was done.
Yeah. So then we cut back to Dad still coming home from the convention. He tries to sell a guy a smokeless ashtray.
Yes.
Which is just a little dome you close on your cigarette, I guess. Something.
Which only seems to be there so it can be brought up later.
Yeah, the whole part where Dad is away and we keep cutting back to him heading back home from this convention. Even now, I don't really understand what the point of that was. I mean, having Dad away so he can't be the one who solves this, I guess. They had to get him away from the situation. I don't know. But again, if he's supposed to be the narrator, it doesn't make any sense. So, let's see. And then we have the movie theater scene.
Yeah.
This is also a very complicated, I mean, technically a complicated scene, because basically you have all of the gremlins inside the movie theater watching Snow White. So you have Disney up on the screen. One of the gremlins in the audience is wearing Mickey Mouse ears. And they're all fascinated by the Seven Dwarves sequence, and they all start going hi ho, hi ho. It's one of the funniest things, because with in context of everything else that's going on, all the destruction and death and everything, you got all these little monsters sitting around singing hi ho. It's very odd. But
it worked in this movie, which is fucking hilarious. That this again, and I know we're not at our conclusion yet, but this movie should not have worked. No. On paper, it should not have worked.
I am amazed it got made, honestly. I guess the only thing was somebody impressed Steven Spielberg enough. Joe Dante must have done, whoever wrote this thing must have pitched a really good idea, because Steven Spielberg saw the merits of it. But anyway, so the theory is that all of the gremlins in town have become so obsessed with Snow White that they're all in the theater. So which it doesn't make any sense.
Well, they explain it away that Stripe is the leader.
Yes.
So they're all just following him, but they also paint him as these, destructive monsters who order doesn't seem to be their thing, but they all fall right in line.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
But then a lot of this movie doesn't make sense. So why do I keep? Honestly, every time I say it doesn't make any sense, I'm like, well, it's Gremlins. Of course it doesn't. Why am I even bothering with that?
Fair point.
So to solve the problem, Billy and Kate decide they're going to blow up the theater by causing a gas leak.
Yes.
I'm like, are you sure there aren't any other people nearby that might get destroyed when you blow up the theater with a gas main explosion? So Billy gets down into the boiler room, opens up a gas valve, and then they escape just in time, closing the door behind them, while we see that Stripe has gotten attracted to some candy in a store across the street, and so he leaves the theater.
Mm-hmm.
The theater explodes after they run out being chased by gremlins. And there's also, again, this is as far as I know, the only other instance in the movie where the gremlins are anything other than a practical effect. As they're running out of the theater, on the other side of the screen, you can see the silhouettes of the gremlins, but they're animated in this instance. They're not actually the shadows. So, and that's very brief. So the theater blows up. But I think Billy catches sight of Stripe as he's in the department store eating candy.
No, Phoebe Cates sees him and points him out.
Okay. And so they run over there, and then we get the product placement extravaganza from here on out. And it's also, this is one of the things, as I was sitting there watching it this morning, I thought, is there a message in this movie about, like, consumerism? And, because Mr. Futterman's all about being scared of imports and xenophobia and everything. And then you've got Dad, who makes all these inventions trying to sell them. And then we end up in a department store at the end with all these gadgets and everything and toys and products.
Well, if you remember, Dad also wanted to mass produce the Gremlin or the Mogwais.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
So yeah, I think you might be onto something with that.
Yeah, there's some. I know I'm getting really deep here, but I think there's some comment on consumerism and capitalism going on in this movie that's just a little off. Now, but there is a message at the end that the old man says, but I'll get there. That might have something to do with it, but I guess we'll see. Anyway, again, the department store sequence is a set piece. There is a lot going on. I cannot possibly encapsulate it all, but we see an E.T. doll, we see a Bugs Bunny toy, we see Barbie specifically, the Barbie car.
Mm-hmm.
Gizmo driving the Barbie car is one of the most iconic things I remember from my childhood from that movie.
Oh yeah,
him zooming around, and it also calls back to an old movie that he was watching with Clark Gable or something, some race car movie that Gizmo saw at the very beginning of the movie. That you hear the lines from it playing in Gizmo's head as he's driving around. But yeah, so Billy goes into the department store to try to track down Stripe. Stripe attacks him with a chainsaw and a crossbow. He shoots Billy with a mini crossbow. It's like, where did you get that? And anyway, and Billy tries to defend himself with a metal baseball bat. It's actually, this is probably, of all the scary stuff in here, this is the one that seems the scariest, because you see Billy get hit in the shoulder with a crossbow bolt and bleeding a little bit. So it's not like the characters are invulnerable, so you don't know what's going to happen next.
Right.
But Gizmo shows up to save the day in the Barbie car. And then Stripe sees a water fountain over in the gardening area. And so he starts going towards that, because now he's going to start all over again and start making more bad guys. In the meantime, morning has come and the sun is up. Somehow we went from pitch black just a few minutes ago, but now the sun is up and bright and streaming in through the windows. And Gizmo opens up the blinds just as Stripe is on top of the fountain getting ready to bubble up some more gremlins, and the light hits him and he does a total Dracula and starts melting right there, and is probably the scariest image of the whole movie, is this melting gremlin.
I would say no. Him
really?
Crawling out a moment later.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, I guess I'm just talking about in general, that whole sequence of him melting, coming out. Like, yeah, just the skeleton and then bubbling down into a puddle of goo. Yeah, that whole thing is probably the most terrifying scene of the whole movie at that point, just on a visual basis. And again, practical effects, none of it was, CGI or cartoon or anything. The melting of the model, the skeleton jumping out, it disintegrating into a puddle of, of slime, all of that in camera, practical effect, better than anything that CGI could ever make, and it's just it is a credit to all of the people that made that movie the way it was, because it still looks good today.
It does, yeah.
It's sort of like The Thing with John Carpenter. There's some effects that never go stale.
The skeleton thing crawling out is a little cheesy looking. But it works. Again, so much of this movie's cheese, but it works. That's what that should have been called, cheese, but it works.
So then we essentially wind down and we're getting to the resolution. Dad shows up finally to the town being just completely, destroyed. And it's so calm about it. This is one of the things, like all the characters just sort of act calm in the face of just absolute, catastrophe. And as they're back at home and they're sort of assessing everything, Grandpa shows up. Chinese store owner Grandpa shows up.
In their house without knocking.
Yeah, he somehow found out where they lived, walked in their house, and he Dad says, "Oh, this is the guy I bought bought Gizmo from." He says, "Yeah, bought," and he throws the $200 on the couch.
And then comes my favorite line of the whole movie.
What's that?
Because we see the old man look at the television where there's a reporter explaining what's been going on in town.
Yes, that's right.
And you're expecting the Chinese guy to lose his fucking mind. And he looks at the dad and he goes, "You let him watch TV?" It's like, oh my fucking God. Yeah, that's the story. That's the moral.
You taught him to watch television?
Taught him to watch TV? Yes. Well, like, oh my God.
But here's the line that comes from Grandpa that to me is supposed to be like the moral of the story, because he says, again, he repeats, like at the beginning of the movie, Mogwai requires a great responsibility. And he says, and I tried to write it down verbatim, your society does to Mogwai what it does to all of nature's gifts.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So I guess, again, there's some kind of message there about commercialism, consumerism, etc. Maybe.
Exploitation of plants, animals, that kind of shit. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's something in there about that. And then we have Dad narrating the end. It's like, so the next time you see this, he just might have a gremlin. Like, and as a kid, I always thought, it kind of made me paranoid. maybe a little paranoid.
That's what scared my daughter, because I never, like I said, when I watched this, to me, it was just a big joke. It was a funny movie. It was fun.
Yeah.
She watched it when she was a little bit younger than I was. And it scared the bejesus out of her. She was afraid to look under the sink. Which, yes, I rewatched it. I'm like, oh yeah, whoops, my bad.
Oh, Data Wasteland mentions, what a world, what a world. Stripe says that in his high-pitched little voice as he's melting. And that's a reference all the way back to Wizard of Oz, of course, with the Wicked Witch of the West. So anyway, that's Gremlins in a nutshell, so to speak. You really do have to watch it, obviously, to get the full effect of it. But like Monkey said, this is a movie that, by all rights, really shouldn't have worked because you've got you're trying to tell what is essentially a monster movie, but with scenes and set pieces that are completely ludicrous, even for the sake of trying to set something inside the real world. You've got this wholesome town that's right out of the 50s, although set in 1984. It's a throwback to the old 50s movies of sci-fi and horror and everything, but it's trying to be like three different genres at once. And it shouldn't work, but it balances everything perfectly to where, you know, the characters, the human characters are playing it straight in a situation where all the gremlins are operating outside the bounds of reality. But they don't comment on that really. They don't ask the questions the audience does. They just sort of take it as this is what's happening. And since the characters don't make a big deal out of it, we don't either as the audience. We just kind of go along with it.
Well, it goes back to a time, and this is something that I've mentioned, like with the Marvel movies. We don't need a giant setup to this. We need to know what causes the gremlins to become gremlins, and how Billy gets them. And then the rest of it, just you don't need a deep backstory. Just throw them in there and let chaos ensue, which is what they did with this movie.
Yeah.
And it just works because for every time you're sitting there thinking, okay, they're just being ridiculous, then you get something like, okay, I could kind of see that. So as I said at the beginning, it plays itself straight while making an absolute ass of itself at the same time. It is ludicrous yet believable.
Yeah, I mean, if you took out all the filler and you just wrote down the basic plot structure, it would take up less than half a page. It really would. I mean, as far as like, okay, you know, cute monster comes to town, cute monster turns into more monsters, monsters take over the town and tear everything up. And everything else is just built up around that very bare skeleton, and it's not important really. And yet, because you keep the plot so simple, you have all this extra room to sort of really make memorable events and characters. And again, it's basically a series of set pieces after about the first third of the movie.
I would say even from the beginning of the movie. I mean, the town itself.
Yeah.
The fuck, I forget their name. The Billy's family, their family house.
The Peltzers.
Their family house, the bar, the theater. The bank doesn't really come back again, which again, I have to think that was something that got cut.
Yeah, like Judge Reinhold was at the bank and the gremlins attack him there or something.
Yeah.
Because him just vanishing from the movie after the first 10 minutes makes absolutely no sense given what they tried to what they seem to be setting him up for.
But again, I fucking love this movie. It is just, it's fun. It's a popcorn movie.
Yes, I mean it's like I said, it's a throwback. It's very simple. You don't have to think too hard about it. You can come into it at any point really and kind of enjoy what's going on. And you know, as simple as it is, the characters are memorable.
Yeah.
You know, I don't remember the last name all the time, but I always remember Billy running around trying to save Gizmo, and Gizmo trying to save Billy. Stripe, you know, honestly, one of the best monster villains of my childhood. I'm not going to put him up there with like Freddy Krueger or anything. When it comes down to like a villain that's a monster, Stripe is up there.
I loved that they included the Gremlins in Lego Batman.
I haven't seen Lego Batman.
Oh God, I just ruined part of it for you.
That's okay.
Yeah, they're villains in Lego Batman. But you're right. And the reason they are is because they are memorable. They're gremlins, for fuck's sake.
Yeah. And that story about Santa Claus, it's just
so awesome.
It's so weird. And it's
Mom and I thought they were going to find a dead animal, but they found Dad. It's like, what the fuck just happened here?
So twisted and odd. It's so out of place. Makes it so like just epic.
And that's how I found out there was no Santa Claus.
It's just like,
Oh, it was so bad. It's so good though.
drama. It's just and it and again, putting that story in that movie at any point shouldn't have worked, but it's fine. At that point, you'll buy anything given what you're led up to. Because they do lead you by the nose bit by bit. It's like, okay, there are things called mogwais. Okay, they can multiply. Oh, now they turn monsters. Now the monsters are wearing mini clothing. Now they're playing poker. Sure, why not? Why not? just take me along for the ride at this point. Just go forward. It's just fine.
They were born yesterday, but they know poker.
They know poker. They make references to ET. They know how to watch TV. They make themselves look like Flashdance. They just know. They just know it's fine. Whatever. They're also to blame for World War II. It's just like,
I think that's part of what made the movie work at the time, at least, is that there were so many pop culture references in it.
Yeah.
Because you guys probably don't remember this. You're all fucking young. Fuck you. That the little Donkey Kong game they were playing, those used to be like a sign that you were a rich kid, because only rich kids had those.
That's true. That's true.
Because there was Donkey Kong, Frogger, Pac-Man. You could get the little arcade game for your house. I always wanted one and never got one.
Before Nintendo, having a video game of any kind in your home, arcade or otherwise, was a status symbol.
Yeah, it was.
It was a show off that your parents had dough. The other thing, too, is that a lot of the references in this movie were of things that had just happened, like Indiana Jones and E.T. E.T. was only 2 years old at that point. It really tells you how quickly back then something could become such a cultural phenomenon that it was relevant to put in there. Now, of course, all of that was just sort of sucking off Steven Spielberg for the sake of him producing the movie. But all the same, that they would put that in there and people would know what they were. I mean, I remember seeing when I was a kid and I recognized E.T. and the Indiana Jones thing. And I wasn't that far out from when they were made at that point. So,
well, and a lot of those things are still cultural icons today.
Right.
Whereas there's things that have been pop culture since that have come and gone. You know what I mean? How many people remember Andrew Dice Clay being a big thing? And granted, he wasn't a movie or anything, but
no, he was in Ford Fairlane.
Well, sure.
he was in Brain Smasher.
But if he was thrown in a movie today, nobody would get the reference. Where
probably not.
Pretty much most of what they bring up, with the exception, Flashdance is the only one that really jumped out at me.
Yes, that one is a little bit antiquated, a little bit obscure today as compared to then.
Sure. Everything else, though, I mean, is like, oh yeah, I know what that is. And I think my children would recognize most of what's in there.
Right. Or things that were so generic that they could go anywhere, like the Flasher Gremlin or the Blues Bar Gremlin or whatever else. And of course, they carried the gimmick Gremlin idea to the hilt in the sequel, where every Gremlin is a different kind of Gremlin, from a spider Gremlin to an electrified Gremlin to a Smurfette Gremlin, etc. But that's a whole other ball of wax. So yeah. I don't know if there's anything more else to say about that.
What I will say is I saw Gremlins 2. I didn't care for it, mostly because they didn't play it straight at all, which I think was a mistake. They could have done just as much humorous shit as they did in that one without being a complete parody of the first movie. But this one was just, as I said, it shouldn't have worked, and it did, because they did it so well.
Yeah, and at that point, you'd never seen anything like the Gremlins as characters, or Gizmo, as cute as he was. If they were to do a sequel again, I think the only way they could go is if the only way to save the day is that Gizmo has to make himself into a gremlin. That Gizmo turns himself into a gremlin in order to be powerful enough or whatever to fight the bad guy. So the good gremlin, Gizmo eating after midnight intentionally. That's the only place I could see them going as a plot point if they were ever do a sequel again or something.
I think if they were going to do it again, you just have it's Gizmo's grandchild or something, the only other good Mogwai. introduced to a whole new thing, and just redo the movie. Not exactly. You do Die Hard 2. That's what you do. You do Die Hard 2.
Gremlins in an airport?
No, what I mean, I mean how Die Hard 2 is Die Hard 1 in an airport. You do the same thing. You change the set pieces. You introduce sillier new gremlins. Instead of blowing up a theater, maybe you where else could you put them? Have them take over a TGI Fridays and blow that up. You don't have to make it too deep. Just stick with what worked with the original, and it's that it was silly but played it straight at the same time.
Flair Fritz says, aren't they already making a sequel remake or something? I don't know, but I would not be surprised. I would imagine a reboot more than a sequel.
I've heard rumors, but I can't corroborate.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like I say with most remakes, it's completely unnecessary, especially in this case, because the first one just works so well. You don't need to remake it. Just re-release it to theaters, for fuck's sake. You want to make some money off the Gremlins property. People will go see it in the theater. It's not that far of a stretch to think.
Yeah.
But if they did do a remake or a reboot or whatever the hell, the only way I would take it at all seriously to see, even if I knew it was going to suck, would be if I knew the Gremlins were all practical. If they filled the movie with CGI Gremlins, I wouldn't even anywhere near it.
No, don't do that.
Because honestly, and I know I've been gushing over this the entire time, but having watched the making of so many movies and special effects and things over the years, as I watched this film, the amount of technical artistry necessary to make it work as good as it did, to make all the Gremlins seem like characters in the world and alive and moving around and everything else and emoting and etc. It cannot be said enough how much work and talent went into that to make it work as well as it did. That's one of the features of this movie, is that you have completely made up characters that feel like they belong and feel like they are alive. To try to redo that with somebody just sitting in a and I understand there's a lot of artistry and technical stuff behind CGI. I get that. There's nothing compares to the visceral nature of practical effects in camera. It just doesn't, no matter how hard you try.
I was talking to a friend of mine about this, and we were discussing the first Transformer movie, and he goes, why does that look so much better to me than other CGI? And I told him, I said, it's because you have no frame of reference for a Transformer.
Yeah.
So you throw a giant robot up on the screen, you can make it look pretty decent in CGI. You try to throw something like a Gremlin, which we've already seen, or any animal really, even an alien, it's going to look funky because your mind is going to try to link it to a dog or a cat or something that you've already seen, and it's going to look wrong. One of my favorite scenes in this movie is actually when the Gremlins are going to run over the xenophobe guy. I forget his name. Sorry.
Mr. Futterman.
Futterman, yes. And they show them in the plow truck, and they are just having such a good time.
Yes.
They're jumping, and the gremlin, that, because there's a gremlin laying on the wheel, but there's also one standing, rotating it. And you just see the happiness on his face, and I don't think you can do that very well with CGI.
Yeah, you talk
I think
about
it would look all fucked up.
Yeah, you talk about CGI animals. You want to talk about one of the things that ruined The Last Jedi for me? Was the overuse of CGI in that film, and especially, and I won't say where. There's plenty of it, but there's a particular sequence that deals with animals, and it is so obviously CGI. It takes you completely out of the movie, and I just think, there's a whole. I just think back to Return of the Jedi, where you had Jabba the Hutt was sitting there. He was a real thing, acting with the actors, and he looks like a living being. And it's four guys inside of a giant rubber shell, and you completely set that aside because it just looks like it so belongs there. Yeah, you cannot replace practical effects. I know I'm going to go on to that further, but anyway, anything else we want to say about Gremlins before we wrap up for the day?
No, I want to point out, guys, that the stream is shorter than the movie.
Yes, it's true. The stream is shorter than the movie. This movie, again, this movie is not complex. There's not a lot of layers to it or anything. It's a very simple story. It's a very entertaining movie, and you know, it's hard. There's not a whole lot to break down after about the midway point because it's just set piece event after set piece event, which I know sounds kind of bland, but really it isn't.
It's great.
Yeah. So the plan for next time. Presumably next week, but no, wait, next week is Christmas.
Next week is Christmas.
Oh, so we will not be, yeah, I will not, well, I won't be here in time to do a show next week. We could do.
What's that?
Well, since SDA is going to be gone that Monday, and we're going to have the Lords of the Night show, we could use deep topic time to review Lethal Weapon.
We can do that because, well,
if you want to, I mean, it's an idea.
I don't know if I want to do that with Lethal Weapon. It's
okay.
It's a pretty deep movie with a lot of stuff.
That's true. Okay, well then, guys,
you know what we'll do?
What?
We'll just talk Christmas movies in general.
Sure, and then we'll put off the next time we do this. It'll be Lethal Weapon on Monkey's channel.
Which, by the way, you realize it's going to be like 2 weeks, right?
Yeah,
because the following week will be New Year's.
Yeah.
So, guys, we'll probably be taking a 2-week hiatus from this.
That's probably true. All right, guys. Well, the next time that we do this, whenever it is, and it will be slightly out of season compared to our intentions, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles. Yeah, we'll cover our third and I guess last holiday film until we do another one, Lethal Weapon on Monkey's channel. But regardless, guys, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this and Die Hard last time over on Monkey's channel. Everybody in the chat, thank you so much. Flair Fritz, thank you so much for the donation. Appreciate that. So otherwise, guys, we will see you in about 2 weeks with Lethal Weapon. Have a happy, and safe holiday season, as it were. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Merry Kwanzaa, whatever else you like. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.